Howdy, readers. I'm Jason. This is Chapter and Verse, and this is the November Ramble with the Yarn, which I am in dire need of. I don't know about you guys, but it has been, it's just been, I could say it's been a busy week, kind of crazy week. My facial hair is driving me nuts. I'm not sure what that's all about. But I feel like it's been kind of a crazy month, the last month, or even the last 6 weeks. But yeah, so to give you some idea, on Monday, got off work, took Kelly home, and went to the grocery store. And, we always take our little reusable grocery bags that are larger than regular grocery bags. But got enough groceries to fill one of those up. Went through the line, checked out, was given my receipt, and got my cart. And I almost got all the way out of the grocery store without any of my groceries. So they called me back, they hailed me from a distance. So I've just been really, really busy, really, really distracted, not sleeping terribly well. Just a lot going on, really. It's the busiest time of the year in my profession, right? So I work in advertising, and if there's one time of the year when even the places that don't typically advertise, it's the lead up to Christmas. So just been super, super busy trying to line all kinds of things up with work. And Blue had to go to the vet this week for a dental to have his teeth cleaned. And they called me in the middle of the day and said they needed to extract two, a little tiny one in the front and one of his molars. He had a resorptive lesion, which they explained to me on the phone. My vet explained to me on the phone what it was. And then when I went later to pick him up, they showed me photos of it all. I will spare you guys those. And x-rays as well. And that tooth needed to come out. And I think it actually explains something he's been doing for some time now. He used to do this thing, and maybe he still will. Who knows? Maybe it's a behavioral thing at this point. It's habit. I don't know. But he would do this thing where he would just turn his head and just kind of grind away at his teeth. And you could hear it. You could hear the teeth grinding. So hopefully this extraction that he went through will have taken care of that problem. So he's on the mend. But that was, there was that to think about this week too. And it's just been crazy. I apologize for, not getting as many videos up here lately as I have been wont to do in the past. I really like to do at least 2 a week, but 3 a week preferably. So I haven't been able to do that. But I'm doing what I can, and that's all any of us can ever do. So just think about that. I probably shouldn't even be apologizing for not having gotten so many videos out. Life happens. Life just gets in the way sometimes, and it's a busy time of the year, and we've got a lot going on, and that's just kind of how it is. So, but I'm here with you now, and working on a little blues blanket. Book stuff. So it looks like a couple of booktubers whose channels I really love and who I follow. One of whom I'm friends with, and one of whom knows I exist, I think, but barely knows I exist. They are both taking some time away from BookTube for various reasons that I'll not go into. But Mark from Words Everywhere looks like he's going to be away for the rest of this year. And Sophie from Portal in the Pages is taking a break of a couple of months, it looks like, from BookTube as well. So they will be missed. If they are watching this video right now, know that you'll be missed. I look forward to seeing reinvigorated content from both of them in January with any luck. So I've been reading White Teeth by Zadie Smith with my book club. I'm only like 60 pages into it. I've never read any of Zadie Smith's fiction before, but I'm having some problems with this, and I didn't anticipate having problems with it, but almost from the get-go. And don't spoil anything, please, in the comments for me. But if you've read it, and if you're familiar with Salman Rushdie's work too, let me know if I'm crazy. Let me know what you think. But almost from the beginning, this feels like Salman Rushdie, without the magical realism. I mean, if somebody had given me 5 pages from White Teeth and asked me who wrote these, I would have read them and I would have said it's probably Salman Rushdie. And so I find myself wondering if Zadie Smith, because she published this, I think, when she was like 24, which means that she wrote it even earlier, obviously. And, God, my mustache is driving me crazy. And it makes me wonder about that old kind of saying, or that old adage, right, that I have long heard before in relation to writers and musicians and even filmmakers. And that is that at the beginning of one's career, or at the beginning of one's life as a writer, while one is finding his or her voice, that writer engages in mimicry to some extent. And by which I mean that because they don't really have their own kind of personal style yet. I mean, I suppose they all have their voices at the beginning of their careers, their own distinct voices. But I don't think they necessarily have their own style yet. And so they can't but kind of mimic the styles of the writers that they admire the most. And reading this book, I'm just left with this feeling that, man, Zadie Smith just fucking loved Salman Rushdie's fiction in her early 20s. And so it's a little bit disappointing. It's just a tiny bit disappointing because I wanted the novel from the get-go to be a little bit more kind of sure-footed. Partly because I've just heard such good things about it over the years. And partly because I know many people, including Kelly, who recently finished it, who really, really like it, if not love it. I think it's even a favorite book of Jasmine from Jasmine's Reads. So anyway, so I'm kind of struggling a little bit with it. I mean, it's a good book. It's even a very good book. It's really well written. She clearly had a hell of an intellect, even at that age. But it just doesn't feel as Zadie Smith as I was hoping it would feel, if that makes any sense. It feels more like a kind of Rushdie facsimile to me. But anyway. And I suppose the last thing I wanted to talk about was, so the Guardian Books page has this thing, and I want to say it's maybe every week, where they, it's not an interview, it's not a profile, but where they take a writer and essentially give that writer the same prompts that they do every writer each week. It's a little bit like a tag, actually. But anyway, so they ask them, what book sort of changed your life, or what book this, or what book that. Entertainment Weekly used to do a version of this on its last page. Maybe they still do, because that was an infrequent thing even back when they did it. Anyway, so this last week in The Guardian, they profiled or tagged Esi Edugyan, who wrote Half-Blood Blues, which was a Booker finalist once upon a time. And I never really had any interest in reading that. But she was also recently a finalist for the Booker this year for Washington Black, which I haven't read yet, but I think sounds absolutely fabulous. I'm really, really excited to read Washington Black. They did this piece with her, and apparently the series is called Books That Made Me. And I always read it, even if I don't know the writer, because I'm really interested to find out what other books writers think are important. And so the first prompt was the book that changed my life. The second prompt was the book I wish I'd written. And she said Beloved by Toni Morrison. I really, really liked that answer. Beloved was a really important book to me, and still is. I mean, I've read it just the once, but I read it in my early 20s, and it blew me away. It absolutely blew me away. But here's where things got really interesting for me. And by interesting, I mean I have a suspicion that Esi Edugyan is quite possibly a writer who is just Like we're just on the same wavelength. Like our brains and our hearts are just in the same groove on the same record, if that makes any sense. So the next prompt was the book that is most overrated. And her answer was Anything and Everything by Charles Bukowski. So to that, I would say here is a writer after my own heart, really. I can't freaking stand Charles Bukowski. I have yet to read a single stanza of his poetry that I like or admire. I feel queasy even thinking about Bukowski's work. The last book that made me cry, she said, aside from Blood in the Water, I was moved by John Williams' Stoner. So Stoner is not the last novel that made me cry, but it is the second to last novel that made me cry. And it was, I don't know, 4 years ago that I read that, 3 or 4 years ago. So that answer really did it for me, you might say. The next prompt, the last book that made me laugh. She said Joshua Ferris's Then We Came to the End. If you have not read Then We Came to the End, you have to read that. We read it a few years ago in my book club. I think I loved it probably more than anyone else. It's one of the very few books that I've actually raised my star rating on after the book has kind of spent some time living in my imagination. But it's freaking hysterical. It's also very strange and very tragic. It's also incredibly wise about the advertising industry in which I work. It's set in an ad agency, I think in Chicago, and it just gets it. Like, it gets everything absolutely right. And it's funnier than hell. It's laugh out loud funny. So anyway, book she couldn't finish, The Fellowship of the Ring, which I've read and which I love, but years later I tried to reread it and I got like 150 pages into it and I just couldn't do it. For some reason I just got slogged down. The book she's most ashamed not to have read, Moby Dick. I have started Moby Dick twice. I have read the first half of it twice, but I've never gotten all the way through it. So that might very well be my answer to that prompt. And the book she gives as a gift. And to that she said Roberto Bolaño's 2666. So I had an exchange recently with Steve Donahue about this book. I haven't read it, but I'm really excited to read it. And I'm actually going to read it next year as part of a project, which I'm going to be kind of launching here on my channel, which I'll announce later this month. Steve Donahue hates that novel, absolutely hates it. But I've always wanted to read it, and I've had numerous people over the years whose opinions I really trust. Not that I don't trust Steve's, but whose opinions I really trust. Just recommend it to the skies, just praise it to the heavens. So I'm going to read that next year. But she just sounds like a writer whose aesthetic, maybe whose mind, is just in real sympathy with mine, which is cool. So I think that we rarely encounter writers like that. I mean, we often encounter writers whose work we love or admire, or that tickles us or what have you. But it's pretty rare to find a writer who is just somehow on our wavelength. And it sounds like she might be on mine. I hope you're all doing well. I hope your week has been less insane than mine has been, or at least than mine has felt. I hope you're getting your yard work taken care of and your leaves. That's going to be my big project tomorrow. I'm not looking forward to that, climbing the ladder. But it's got to be done. So have a nice weekend, everybody. I may or may not see you again later this weekend, but I will see you soon. Rest assured. Adios.